Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Neda Elattar, and I am the ECD specialist or Early Childhood Development Specialist for Emergencies based out of UNICEF headquarters in New York. I have been asked by the Links organizers and the Links Network, Queen's University in Lancaster, and colleagues to present to you today about early childhood development in humanitarian settings and early childhood development and the impact or the link to social cohesion programming. I would like to start off by just giving a definition of what UNICEF or what we define as early childhood development or early childhood development. So with regards to ECD, we look at it from the when, what, and how perspective. The when is the period of life which we consider the early childhood period of life, which is really divided or encompasses three distinct phases, which are conception to birth, birth to 3 years old, and then the preschool and pre-primary years, or up until age of school entry. The what constitutes development? Development is really the outcome, is really an outcome. It's the continuous process of acquiring skills and ability during this earlier childhood age period across the domains of cognition, language, motor, social, and emotional development. And then the how, how does development occur? Development is the result of the interaction between the environment and the child. And that is ultimately how development occurs. It is the interaction between the individual and their environment and surroundings, including their parents and caregivers. And that environment can be something that supports their positive development, or it can be something that includes adversity, which can impact children's development negatively, unfortunately. So I just wanted to start off with a definition just so that we are all have an understanding, or that you understand where I'm coming from in terms of how we define early childhood development. Now, I want to take a moment. Many of you probably have seen this slide many times. This is from the Lancet a few years ago. And I just wanted to kind of just remind us all of why the early childhood period is so important for so many aspects of development. So if you look at this table, what you see really is that the foundations and the majority of brain development is actually happening in the first year of life. It begins at conception, your brain development, physical, organ system development. And then there are certain aspects of it, like sensory pathways related to vision and hearing, language, and even higher cognitive functions really peak during the first year of life in those early years. So what we do and how we build our children's brains, how we build our own brains is really at this stage, at this age, or this age range, is really integral and has an impact on later life outcomes. It is the foundation, the period of life where we are really forming the foundation from which everything else is built. Now, why did I switch to this topic of toxic stress? Now, when we think about brain development in environments where there is conflict, when there is violence and stress, such as areas where there are ethnic tensions, religious tensions, where there is war and conflict happening, what happens is those adverse experiences, those as well as other adverse experiences like poverty or adversity factors like poverty, exposure to violence, abuse, etc. These can lead the body and the brain can lead essentially to a neurobiological response, which we call toxic stress, which ultimately puts the body and the mind into this constant stressful position where it actually can hinder brain development of very young children. I mean, adversity influences adults and people later in life also in very deep ways. But during this early childhood period where we are building the foundation for our brain and our body, we are especially vulnerable. And it is therefore important to ensure that we develop programming and structures and empower communities and parents to buffer and to mitigate the impacts of this type of violence and adversity on young children. You know, there's of course the preventative angle where we work towards building more peaceful societies in general, where we promote and try to prevent violence from happening to begin with. But in the situations where it does happen, we need to find ways in order to mitigate the impacts that those experiences can have on young children. And the impacts are not just on children's brain development and their physical, socio-emotional well-being and their ability to learn, but it also, these experiences early in life, these adverse experiences early in life, can really lead to lower economic productivity, the lowered capacity to learn, or where children are less likely to be able to learn, and also it could lead to a perpetuation or this constant cycle of violence through interpersonal relationships and exacerbated distrust. So for society, a lack of accessible ECD services, early childhood development services, I would say integrated early childhood development services, can lead to higher unemployment rates in the long run. I touched on that a little bit earlier, and consequently higher public expenditure. Essentially, there is a high return on investment with regards to investment in early childhood development. So when we invest in young children, we are supporting their foundational development, their brain development, and is ultimately setting themselves up as well as society to stand on stronger footing. Now, what we do know is that ECD services in humanitarian and fragile contexts, including conflict-affected areas, can end preventable deaths of newborns and children under 5. So they can support the survive agenda, and they can also drive economic recovery and peace building, as well as supporting children in terms of their overall development and well-being. And in some ways, we can say the thrive agenda. So not only to survive, but to thrive economically, socially, emotionally, academically, etc. Now, the issue is that, in ECD components are not well represented in humanitarian preparedness and response plans. And where they are, implementation is inconsistent and lacks or is weak in strong cross-sectoral coordination. So ultimately, there are programs out there, there are ECD interventions out there that are being implemented in humanitarian contexts, but they are not really well represented in humanitarian response plans. They are not being implemented to the maximum that they are able to. They're not able to be as effective as they can be. Now, I want to just flag one figure on the slide here, the figure on the very, I guess it would be your bottom right, my bottom left. 1 in 5 babies were born into conflict-affected areas. This is a figure from 2018. And when you think about it, and think about what I just talked about in terms of brain development, this is a tremendously large proportion of children, of babies who are born into these conflict-affected areas, who are growing up in these conflict-affected areas, who many of whom live the majority of their early childhood period in conflict affected areas. So the impact that that experience has on them without proper intervention and without support to parents and caregivers can ultimately lead to both negative short and long-term impacts for children's development and well-being. So, and I also want to point to the figure on the right, the nurturing care framework components, which are adequate nutrition, good health, early learning, safety and security, and responsive caregiving. Now, there is a percentage of nurturing care framework interventions that has been recommended, and only a proportion of them has been actually included in humanitarian response plans. And ultimately, that's what this figure represents. It represents that there is a tremendous amount of room for growth in all components of nurturing care, which ultimately support children's development and well-being. Now, ECD services, we do also know, can lead to more peaceful families and societies in the long term. Early interventions, can lead to harmonious relationships and pro-social behaviors with families. And I'll give a few examples of some of these programs later on. And then also, when we think about equity, having accessible ECD services that are distributed equitably to different communities can create more nourishing and stable environments for young children that allow them ultimately to reach their developmental potential, irrespective of their country of origin, irrespective of their status in a country, whether they're a refugee or not, etc. Now, how does early childhood development contribute to peace building? This is a question that many of you may actually know the answer to or know part of the answer to. I don't think any of us know all the answers, but we know parts of it. And that's why we work together to create and are working together, and you all are working together to create the evidence base and strengthening the evidence base that we all need, looking at this intersection of early child development and peace building or social cohesion. What we do know is that ECD can contribute to building children's ability to trust and forming relationships with others. It can improve educational attainment and well-being. It models working cooperatively and managing conflict, regulating emotions, showing appreciation for diversity, and processing complex information. So a lot of ECD programs will have group activities or activities that are related to managing conflict or understanding and dealing with your emotions and demonstrating how one can deal with their emotions, and also how one can be more empathetic to others from different ethnic groups, from different religious groups, etc. ECD can also mitigate children's physical, verbal, and psychosocial violence. It can also improve a mother's or caregiver's well-being. There are parenting programs. When I say ECD, it's kind of slash parenting programs. And we do know that there are great mother or parenting programs out there that engage both parents actually and improve caregiver well-being. Now, in addition to all of this, we know that ECD diminishes inequities and contributes to social justice, that the investment in it can contribute to social justice. And it serves as a platform for enhancing positive contact for peace building and community cohesion. So for example, if you have a program where you bring together mothers from different ethnic groups who don't normally whose tribes or whose communities or whose neighborhoods don't get along with each other, but you bring them together in a safe and in a way where you're engaging community leaders and community gatekeepers to bring them together and ultimately work on enhancing positive contact through their common interest, which is the development of their children and the well-being of their young children. Now, next, I just wanted to talk about some of the tools that UNICEF and partners use in conflict-affected areas, in non-conflict affected areas, but some of these tools were actually built for emergencies and including conflict-affected areas. The first tool here is the ECD kit for emergencies. This is UNICEF's kit, which is procured at a global level. This is highly procured, highly utilized across all regions of the globe. And it is a kit that ultimately supports play-based opportunity for children. It affords its play-based opportunities for children between the ages of 3 to 6. This kit we are actually currently remodeling to have a stronger and better impact on children's development. The second tool here, which many of you may be familiar with, is a UNICEF and WHO developed tool called Care for Child Development. And this ultimately is a tool that provides recommendations and ideas really for parents to utilize to stimulate and engage their young children. Some of it is play-based learning and stimulation, and ultimately it's to support children's development. Now, the last package here that I will talk about is called Caring for the Caregiver. This is a package that is still being tested. It is being implemented in many countries, and we will be implementing it in humanitarian settings as well. It is being implemented in countries with humanitarian context, but not in humanitarian context yet. But we hope that that will be the next step. And this tool ultimately is designed to support parent or caregiver well-being. We know that there is a link between caregiver well-being and development outcomes of children. So it is important to support children from the multi-facets or the multi-perspectives that influence them, including their own caregivers and caregiver well-being. Now, next, I want to talk about a project or a program that was funded by H&M Foundation from 2017 through 2021. It's still running. It will be ending quite soon. And this is a program with a project, or say, with 3 outcomes. One outcome is to reach, about 145,000 children, parents, and teachers, to benefit them with early childhood programs, early childhood / parenting programs. The second outcome is to create enabling environments and systems for enhanced early childhood development services, ensuring that these services are strengthened across 4 countries, including Egypt, Vietnam, Mali, and Timor-Leste. And then the third outcome is to develop or generate new data on how early childhood development can increase tolerance and social cohesion. And this is something that is being generated and analyzed, and the final reporting will be coming out very soon. And this is actually the work that is being done as part of the relationship with LINCS and with Lancaster University and Queen's University of Belfast. An innovative measurement framework, which you're all very familiar with, is being utilized for this evaluation, which is taking place actually across the 4 countries I mentioned earlier, plus Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan. I will talk a little bit about the programming in Kyrgyzstan, which many of you, again, may be familiar with. But UNICEF has been modeling an ECE intervention, early childhood education intervention, in select geographic areas in order to support harmonious interethnic relationships and conflict prevention in areas where there may be a history or areas that may be prone to ethnic tensions. The program aims to really engage parents and children in positive attitudes towards inclusion, and also to promote tolerance attitudes. The intervention is also targeting young people, since they are the majority of parents and caregivers. So not just young children, but also their parents who happen to be youth or young people. The program is a multimedia program that includes a television series, an animated television series that really is supposed to foster gender equity and respect for diversity, respect and understanding. The program also focuses on engaging fathers and grandfathers, which is great in terms of demonstrating gender equity and, breaking certain gender stereotypes when it comes to caring for young children. The Magic Journey, which is the animated series that I talked about earlier, the TV program, it appears on Kyrgyzstan National Broadcasting Company, and it has been on air for quite some time. This program produces new series or segments or clips of the Magic Journey cartoon, each one targeting on-the-ground discrimination in terms of ethnicity, gender, and diversity. So the theme of the animated series is really about combating discrimination with regards to ethnicity, gender, and diversity. These are some of the evaluation outcomes. I won't go into detail in them, but ultimately the program has shown an increase in socio-emotional development, in children's ability to express their emotions, to understand how it may feel to be excluded, so to exhibit empathy, or to understand at least what something may feel like to someone else if they are excluded from an activity. There's also an increased ability to recognize, national instruments, an ability to show willingness to be more inclusive of others in general, of people of different genders and people of different nationalities. And likewise, there are some very positive outcomes with regards to parents and teachers. I'll just read out one testimonial that I really liked about the Magic Journey. This broadcast cartoon reaches the most vulnerable regions of Kyrgyzstan. Every episode invites children and their parents, the most remote regions of Kyrgyzstan. Every episode invites children and their parents to send in their story ideas for future episodes. In this way, children have become regular contributors and are actively creating their own magic journey. Now, the reason why I like this quote is that it demonstrates how a effective program should be developed. It should be developed with contribution from young children, their ideas, their experiences, as well as community members and parents. That is ultimately the best way to produce a program, is to ensure that you are engaging parents and caregivers. Now, I will also talk very briefly about the Tajikistan program, which is very similar and works in coordination with the Kyrgyzstan program. The Tajikistan program really focuses on mother tongue-based multilingual education. So here we have mother tongue being used, which we know is very effective in terms of, relaying messages and being able to communicate to children and communities in general. But also brings in a multilingual perspective, which exposes children to different languages, to Uzbek, to Tajik, and ultimately, demonstrates what it may mean to live in a cohesive society, or how you can be friends with somebody who speaks a different language at home. And the program also includes both the Magic Journey, which I spoke about earlier, as well as peace education and parent support. So again, that double generation, including the parents and the young children, and kind of hoping and working towards those two streams of work really having a synergistic effect. I'll talk briefly here about the one testimonial. The mother of two young sons from Tajikistan, where most of the residents are from the Uzbek minority state, says, "My son Ahleddin was in the ECE program during the 2018-2019 academic year, and he successfully started his pre-primary school at the local school, and he now speaks more Tajik with me, though we are Uzbek. He has improved his communication skills. So through this program, her son has been exposed to another language, speaks more of it, and hopefully what that means is that he is more accepting of this language and can likely make more friends who speak this language, this other language, whether it's, whatever language or whatever region we are in. I'll talk briefly as well about Mali. In Mali, we have a program called the Mama Yellen program, which is ultimately a parenting program for mothers, model mothers. And the program really trains community leaders to be model mothers, to engage other mothers in the community on positive parenting practices, ultimately to support children's development. And the program focuses on nutrition, stimulation, early learning, and it brings together mothers from both more sedentary or stable communities as well as nomadic communities, and women from different ethnic groups. This program brings them together to learn together, to share their stories together, to ultimately build ties between them at this intersection of how they can support their children's development. So, and this has included women from communities, from various communities, from different communities who don't always engage with each other, but this is an opportunity for them to do so. I will just read out one testimonial from this one. Mama Yellen's impact regarding social cohesion has been impressive. According to the local development service in the Sugu region where the program has been piloted, the program has provided an opportunity for mothers to get to know one another. Remarkably, the mothers worked together to set up tontines to overcome financial difficulties, especially during social events such as weddings and baptisms. So ultimately, the program has allowed mothers from different ethnic groups, from different communities to come together and ultimately support each other in times of need. In Vietnam, I'll speak briefly about this just for the interest of time. I feel like I'm going over time already, but the program here is also an integrated early childhood development program, multi-sectoral, takes on a life course approach as well, kind of a multi-generational approach. The aim of the program is really to support children's survival, but also their overall development. And in addition, it strives to strengthen social cohesion and build trust through programs that promote community engagement. So a lot of these programs that I talked about are relatively, they're relatively similar to each other in many ways. They have common characteristics, including focusing on young children, but also focusing on mothers, including social cohesion and the importance of appreciating diversity and respecting people from other groups and other countries and other communities. And why is this important to do at a young age? It is important to do at a young age because, linked to the very first part of my presentation, this is the time, this early childhood period is a time when your brain is developing, your personality is starting to develop, your attitudes about the world are developing, your empathy and your socio-emotional skills are being developed. So ultimately, this is the period where the foundation for respect and understanding, for social cohesion, are also taking place. And ultimately, we see that when you do invest in early childhood development services, and when you do invest in programming that includes social cohesion and peace building, you ultimately will have children and communities who have better pro-social behaviors, stronger pro-social behaviors, supporting each other, doing things that help not only me, but help others as well, even if those others are different from me. Now, this last slide I wanted to present is a little bit off. It's off, but it's also linked to the presentation. I wanted to just present something related to COVID-19 because COVID-19 is still on our minds, and we know that the impact that this has had has exacerbated and has the potential of exacerbating development outcomes for children, especially those living in conflict-affected areas and humanitarian contexts. What we have seen as UNICEF is that there is a significantly that there are significantly more children under 5 who were supported by ECD and caregiver parent support services. So 2,776,000 approximately um, parents and children were supported in 2020 versus 615,000 in 2019. And this huge surge in services is due in large part to the fact that we have had to reach people through multi and mass media during COVID-19. And in conflict affected areas and in humanitarian contexts, often we don't have the access. We don't always have the access to reach people. And so multimedia will ultimately be a way that we may utilize more and more of. And what we need to do here is to evaluate, to continue to evaluate rigorously the multi and mass media interventions that are being developed for COVID-19 and beyond. If there are things that are effective, then maybe we need to use them more. If there are things that are not effective, we need to use them less and use our resources in a better way. So I just wanted to flag this to just raise this to everybody's, I'm sure it's on many of your minds, but I just wanted to remind us all. And then just last point is that more than 30 countries that we monitored as UNICEF modified ECD programming to accommodate programmatic needs as a result of COVID-19. So COVID-19 has really kind of created this surge in both innovation in terms of innovation, but also reach. And hopefully we can all work together on evaluating some of these new interventions and also some of the existing interventions to strengthen them further and ultimately supporting our children further. I thank you so much for your time. I really am sorry if I went over time. And I just thought I would end this with a beautiful photo that I hope that we can see more and more of in our futures with all the families that we engage. Thank you again to links to Queen's University of Belfast, to Lancaster University. It's been a pleasure and I look forward to further engagement. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.